Hello and welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Tom Donkin with our top stories. Violent after President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the UN Security Council prepares its response. Brexit negotiations continue into the night in a fresh attempt to reach agreement over the issue of the Irish border. 200,000 people leave their homes as wildfires continue to rage across California. US Senator Al Franken is stepping down after allegations of sexual misconduct and pressure from within his own party. And it's the culinary treasure that's now a cultural one as well. Pizza makers in Naples get their key heritage status. Hello and welcome. The White House has warned that it would be counterproductive if the Palestinians withdrew from a planned meeting with the US Vice President in the wake of Washington's policy shift on Jerusalem. International concern has continued along with protests in the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Palestinians clashed with Israeli security forces and about 30 Palestinians were injured. But Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated his praise for Donald Trump's decision. Our Middle East editor, Jeremy Bowen, has this report.
Over the years, Palestinians have burnt American flags. The question is whether something fresh is happening, whether this old conflict has entered a new stage. Volleys of tear gas were directed at Palestinian demonstrators by Israeli security forces in towns around Jerusalem. Many Palestinians have serious doubts whether these street clashes change anything. Jerusalem, though, is as special for Palestinians as it is for Israelis, and Trump's decision to ignore Palestinian claims to the city has caused real anger. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is jubilant. He posted this video saying these are great days in Zionism's history. But these are not great days for Israel's foreign relations. Many countries feel they have a stake in Jerusalem. Turkey's President Erdogan, on a visit to Greece, said the US and Israel were trampling over international law, rejecting a UN resolution. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president on the right, traveled to Jordan for emergency talks with King Abdullah, whose warnings ahead were ignored by President Trump. Afterwards, President Abbas said America no longer had a political role in the Middle East. In Gaza, Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, called for drastic action. It's time, he said, for a third Palestinian uprising, another intifada. Uprisings carried a heavy price and didn't get them independence. An intifada is a dangerous option which many Palestinians don't want to repeat. It is real. This was a demonstration at a Palestinian refugee camp in Jordan, and they have international support. The Americans are preparing a new peace plan. It will need something special to succeed. It's important to realize that there is no peace process, and there hasn't been for a few years. But back when they used to have serious peace talks, the negotiators steered well clear of the issue of the future of Jerusalem. That's because all sides realized that it can unleash some really powerful and potentially destructive forces. They treated it as a politically radioactive issue. It was tense tonight at Damascus Gate in the Old City. Sometimes in Jerusalem, nationalism and religious difference are overwhelming. Perhaps it's too much to hope for a peace deal. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Time now for a look at some of the day's other news. And a judge in Argentina has asked for the arrest of the former president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. He said she had deliberately hidden evidence of Iranian involvement in the deadly bombing of a Jewish cultural center in Buenos Aires more than 2 decades ago. The Polish Prime Minister Beata Szydło has resigned despite easily surviving an opposition no-confidence motion. She'd lost the support of her party leader, and it's understood that the finance minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, has been nominated to take over. Russia says its mission accomplished when it comes to its fight against the so-called Islamic State in Syria. The military claimed there were no more settlements under the group's control following heavy bombing over the past month. However, the British Foreign Secretary warned that ISIS was reassembling itself outside of Syria and Iraq. Germany's Social Democrats have voted overwhelmingly in favour of holding talks with Chancellor Angela Merkel's party about resuming the coalition that ended with September's election. The party leader, seen here, Martin Schulz, had out this, but the two sides are quite far apart on key issues from migration to Eurozone reform. Now, Theresa May and her officials have been assessing whether they've found a way to unblock the Brexit talks. If they think they've resolved the dispute over the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, the British Prime Minister will fly out to Brussels. Our reporter is in Downing Street. She said a big push is underway to try and get these negotiations moving.
Through the night, there have been intense talks and many phone calls here trying to get a deal, and both sides are sounding cautiously optimistic. This, of course, follows several days of negotiations between London, Brussels, Belfast and Dublin. And while there's nothing official yet, there are some positive signals. The BBC understands that if a deal can be reached, that is a big if at this stage, then there are plans in place for the Prime Minister, Theresa May, to travel to Brussels first thing in the morning to sign on the dotted line. Let me just remind you of some of the background then. They need to reach a deal on the issue of the Irish border ahead of a deadline on Sunday. Now, it was on Monday that the DUP, Theresa May's vital Westminster allies, they rejected the agreement. And the main sticking point is what will happen with the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland after Brexit. And it's understood that some additional wording has been tried to reassure the DUP. And there's been some lines coming in overnight. I can give you some of those. Gavin Barwell, the number 10 Chief of Staff, he tweeted, "Home for 3 hours sleep, then back to work." A European Commission spokesman tweeted, "We are making progress, but not fully there yet," adding, "Tonight, more than ever, stay tuned." But a DUP source urged some caution. He said they are still working. But perhaps fueling this optimism and fueling the speculation, Donald Tusk, the President of the EU Council, he will be making a statement later this morning giving an update on Brexit negotiations. So nothing confirmed yet, but things appear to be moving in the right direction. And there is, of course, great pressure to come to an agreement on this issue so that talks can move on to the second phase, negotiations about the future trading agreement.
Sarah Corker in Downing Street. Now, raging wildfires fanned by strong winds have forced an estimated 1,000 people to flee their homes in Southern California. Residents of the Bel Air suburb of LA are among those affected, and California's governor has declared a state of emergency. Here's our LA correspondent, James Cook.
The American West was never really tamed. The weather here was always wild and dangerous, and in a warming world, it seems to be getting worse. At the biggest blaze in Ventura County last night, the burning brush looked more like lava. It's now day 3 of this fire, and still it shows no sign of stopping.
Well, the wind has just picked up here in the past few minutes, and the fire is really flaring up on the hillside there and pushing along this canyon. There are some homes down there. We can hear shouts in the valley, and there are some families refusing to leave.
The walkers are among them. They wouldn't answer the door, but they're inside and intent on staying put, despite the danger lurking nearby. At least 24 horses have died in this fire, which is the worst here in living memory.
It's always a difficult time, but it's something they really have to be used to because this is a very rural canyon life, and fires and floods are uncertain.
But even by those standards, this is pretty spectacular.
Well, it is. This doesn't happen very often. Last time it did happen, 1985, and I was here for that event also.
You don't have any access from inside Tahoe.
In the exclusive suburb of Bel Air, they attacked the fires aggressively, successfully saving scores of homes. The musician Lionel Richie and the socialite Paris Hilton were among those forced to flee. Every firefighting aircraft in the United States has been summoned to California, and they're making a big difference. In times of crisis come extraordinary moments of compassion. Here, a man, apparently in distress, runs to rescue a rabbit. One little life saved. Several new fires have broken out in the past few hours. Containing them is a superhuman effort, but Mother Nature is likely to have the last word. James Cook, BBC News, Ojai in California.
And stay tuned because we'll be live in Southern California in just a few minutes. Now, the US Democratic Senator Al Franken is stepping down after a number of women accused him of sexual harassment. Nearly 30 senior Democrats had urged him to go, although Mr. Franken insisted he'd done nothing to bring dishonor to the Senate. Rajini Vaidyanathan reports from Washington.
For years, he was a stand-up comic.
Senator from Minnesota.
But today, Al Franken took to the mic as his political career came crashing down.
Today, I am announcing that in the coming weeks, I will be resigning as a member of the United States Senate.
His resignation came after a number of his colleagues called for him to go over claims he'd sexually harassed women.
Some of the allegations against me are simply not true. Others I remember very differently.
The release of this picture was the beginning of Al Franken's downfall. Radio host Leanne Tweeden said he'd forcibly groped and kissed her as they rehearsed a comedy skit for US troops in Kuwait in 2006. It prompted other women to come forward with similar stories. A celebrity turned politician, he was a well-known face on US television before he won election to the US Senate in 2008. In recent weeks, the corridors of Congress have been rocked by accusations of sexual harassment and by criticism for the way it's been handled. Al Franken is the second Democratic politician to resign over this. But on the Republican side, the case of Roy Moore, who wants to join the ranks here, is being handled very differently.
I, of all people, am aware that there is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party.
A reference there to Roy Moore, who's running for Senate in the state of Alabama and who's accused of sexual misconduct dating back several decades, including an allegation he sexually abused an underage girl.
I do not know any of these women, did not date any of these women, and not engaged in any sexual misconduct with anyone.
President Trump's endorsing him, and Roy Moore has a good chance of winning next week's election. It's a sign of just how split politics and this country is over the issue of sexual harassment. Rajini Vaidyanathan, BBC News, Washington.
Now do stay with us here on BBC News because still to come. Queen Elizabeth welcomes the Royal Navy's largest, most expensive warship. Hello, this is BBC News with the latest headlines. There have been violent protests after President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital as the UN Security Council prepares its response. Late-night negotiations in London in an effort to break the deadlock in Brexit negotiations. Let's get more now on the wild moving through Southern California. We can speak to Isaac Gibbs, who's a photographer and filmmaker from San Diego County. Now, Isaac has just left Bonzul a short while ago, where he was just 15 meters away from the fire. Isaac, thank you very much for joining us. Just give us a sense of what you saw, and you're a photographer who's documented other wildfires. How does this one stack up?
Well, hi everyone. In my experience, this is the biggest one that I'm closest to, and I've been very close to several fires through the West Coast. The last few months, California has really had a serious hit, as well as Oregon and Idaho. So this one happened to be really close to where I went to high school in Fallbrook, California. So as soon as I got word of it, I headed up from downtown San Diego area, about 45 minutes north, and I had to bypass a few detours and road closures to get to some vantage points, but all I have to say is, wow, I watched fires sweep miles within a matter of 30 minutes.
Yep.
And I watched fires that were already taken care of restart back up again.
Sure.
And
Sure, Isaac, we're just looking at the pictures of, the incredible pictures actually of the wildfires as we speak. How much warning have you been given to evacuate? Are you basically at the ready to leave when you're told to do so?
Well, for me, I act as a freelance photojournalist, so I really investigate all the laws and the rules that I need to abide by. So I listen to what they have to tell me, and then I abide by the rules, and I find out what I can do, and then I go do that. I just happen to find myself right in the middle of a fire that was circling around a hilltop that I was on. So it was coming up from the bottom, going through a suburban neighborhood right in Bonsall next to the Apple Market. The Apple Market looked like it was getting very close to going up in flames. Very sad, very sad. At one point, the fire just came over the hill and kind of caught me by surprise. It was in my peripheral vision, and it was about to cut me off from getting to my vehicle at all. So I literally kept the camera rolling and was talking and yelling, and it was super, super loud and windy. There's palm trees falling over, big branches near hitting me and my camera. I was wearing goggles, so I didn't get anything in my eyes. I'm really, really dirty right now. But I ended up being within feet of people losing all of their valuables, their houses. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Isaac, do stay safe. It sounds like you've been incredibly lucky to date, but these fires can be unpredictable. So please take care, and thanks for joining us here on BBC News. Now, it has the makings of a movie feature film, but the story of Katie and the broken bridge is all too true. Her Chinese parents went into hiding to defy the country's one-child policy in China and gave their second child. But they were forced to give her up, and she was eventually adopted by a couple in the US. Katie's original parents left a note with the baby asking her adoptive parents to meet them at Huangzhou's Broken Bridge at the same time each year. And Katie's father returned there, hoping for news. What happened next is revealed in a BBC News documentary. Here's Jen O'Brien.
A meeting at the Broken Bridge, a fitting place to reunite a broken family, torn apart by China's one-child policy.
The
planned by Katie's birth parents, who were forced to abandon her just after she was born.
I don't get super emotional in those type of situations, but for my birth mom, I think she was actually really sad in a lot of ways. She just kind of held me and sobbed for like a half hour.
A day later, Katie visits her parents at home, and they chat for the first time with her adoptive family in the US.
Thank you very much.
For taking care of Katie.
We are also very thankful to you for giving her life.
This is where the story began. Katie's father shows her the place where they left her.
He really just wanted my forgiveness, it was just really interesting because like I understand for him why he needed forgiveness, but for me I didn't feel like I needed to forgive them for anything. From my perspective, I understand their situation as much as I think I can, and like, yeah, they were stuck in a system that was so broken.
It's hard to say goodbye, but back in Michigan, another new chapter is beginning in Katie's life as she prepares for her final year of university.
No matter how much you know about your adoption or why you were given up and how much you feel about it and how much it hurts, or no matter what the circumstance, I don't think it's good to suppress those feelings that might be hard to deal with.
That was the BBC's Jane O'Brien reporting there. And you can see the whole of Katie's story on Our World, The Return. That's on BBC News across the weekend, and you can also see it at the BBC News website. Now, it's the largest and most expensive warship ever built for the Royal Navy. And on Thursday, the Queen commissioned HMS Queen Elizabeth. The ship cost more than £3 billion and has become the flagship of the fleet. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has more.
A day of pride for the Royal Navy and for the nation. The Queen's already named her. Today she made her first visit on board to commission HMS Queen Elizabeth into service. Almost lost in the cavernous hangar, still waiting for aircraft.
As the daughter, wife and mother of naval officers, I recognize the unique demands our nation asks of you. And I will always value my special link with HMS Queen Elizabeth, her ship's company and their families.
The raising of the White Ensign means she is now legally recognised as a Royal Navy warship. Over the past few months, HMS Queen Elizabeth and her 700 crew have been testing her at sea. She's the first of 2 new carriers. Russia's already described her as a large, convenient target, but the government insists she'll be a potent weapon and symbol of British military power.
This isn't just the largest warship ever built for the Royal Navy, it's also the most expensive, costing more than £3 billion. The F-35 jets that will eventually fly off her will cost billions more. And this at a time when the defence budget is under severe pressure, with the prospect of further cuts.
Today, the only cuts being made were to the elaborate cake made to mark the occasion. But the Navy is having to consider axing other ships in the fleet. They still believe it's worth it.
We knew this ship was coming, and her sister ship Prince of Wales and the F-35s that they will operate. So we've been on a long, complicated but committed journey to get to this point, and commissioning of the ship is a key milestone in that journey.
Work on the ship began before the youngest crew member was even born. But like the Queen, she'll be expected to offer decades of loyal service, built for the next 50 years. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, Portsmouth.
Now, the art of making pizza, the way it's done in Naples anyway, has joined an exclusive list of cultural treasures. Making traditional pizza has been stamped with a coveted World Heritage status. Here's James Reynolds.
You might not think that pizza here in Naples needs UNESCO protection. There are plenty of people queuing up, but it's now part of the world's intangible heritage. And if I can get past here, I want to show you how it's done. Eugenio is the pizza maker, and UNESCO's decided that what he's doing here, have a look at how he's kneading the dough. What he's doing here is unique to Naples. It may be copied across the world, but it started here first. Sei felice, no?
Molto felice, molto felice.
He's very happy. Obviously a leading question. And then just have a look here at what happens to the world's intangible heritage. It goes into the oven for just about 2 minutes. And it may be intangible, but in the end, you can eat it.
That's it from me and the team. Hope to see you soon. Goodbye.